and welcome to another episode of Loremaker's Guide to the Galaxy. My name's Adam Weezer. I'm an associate writer here in the Los Angeles studio. And if you haven't seen an episode of this before, it's a chance for a member of the lore team to sit down and give you a personal tour of one of the systems that you'll be seeing in Star Citizen or possibly Squadron 42. So today we're going to start off on we're going to go and visit a very unique system that is unlike any other one in the UE, just for the simple fact that it is the only system to have rejected their official recognition in the UEE Senate. Now, I'll explain why that's super important later on, but let's go and visit that system, which is Charon. So if we look at the star map here, we're here on Earth. I'm just going to bring up the search menu here, drop in Charon. And off we go. Now, Charon has always been considered a frontier system to a certain degree, which I'll get into in a little bit. On the very basic level, it's 5 planets in an asteroid belt. And at the center here is a K-type main sequence star. We'll go in close, and you can see some of the detail in the star map up there. Now, as you can see, just from looking at when we zoom in on the system here, it looks pretty small. Like some systems, when you jump in, the sun will be it will be massive. This is small to reflect the actual size of this sun. This K-type main sequence star is like pale orange and yellow, and it has a luminosity of 0.35. So it's about a third as bright as our sun, and its mass is about 0.74. So it's 75% as massive as the sun at the center of the Sol system. So that's just a little info on the sun itself. Now, the reason why this system became so special and ended up leaving the UEE's Senate, at least, is location, location, location. Now, if I back this up here for a quick second, and you remember you saying this was on the frontier, the Charon system was discovered right there, through Helios, right here, and this was in 2538. There was a merchant marine at the time in Helios by the name of Max Keaton, who was on his very first run, and Helios has these like terrible kind of like solar winds that can like mess with the electronics, and his ship got knocked out because of one of these solar winds, and he was so nervous about being late for his first shipment that he just continued on course while he did a quick diagnostic of his ship's systems. When everything was back online, he checked him out and realized that he was way off course. But he also noticed some strange other anomalies in the area that he was currently going through. So he put a little pin in that, completed his run, came back, and what he found was this medium-sized jump point to the Charon system. Now, part of the reason why the system stayed in isolation for so long was because this was the only way you could get to it. It wasn't, you'll see here, if I turn on the large jump points, you see it connects to Tyrol and the Genesis system. Now, the Genesis system wasn't discovered until 2812. And the Tyrol system wasn't discovered until 2823. So with this being discovered in 2538, there were a few centuries where Charon could literally only get accessed by this one jump point. Now I'll turn these on really quick just to show you that Charon also has one jump point here to Kins, a small one, which is a Banu system, and they also didn't find out about later. But this isolation and the restricted access to the system through this one jump point really had a big effect on this system's history. Now, the second location that's very important here is the planet Charon III. Which we'll go in right here. This is a terrestrial rocky planet, which is the only reason why the UEE even decided to take the system. They terraformed it, figuring that people would want to move in, maybe start industry, but the soil wasn't very fertile, so it didn't attract a lot of farmers. Manufacturing companies that wanted to maybe build something were put off by, the land there was cheap to buy, but getting there just took a lot of time, and getting through the medium jump point was a huge pain in the butt. So this planet ended up basically attracting people who wanted to live on the frontier, people who wanted to be independent and kind of have their own homestead and kind of not be close or be bothered with anyone. Now, the result of this is the second location problem that happens here in Charon, and that is that in 2635, Livia Messer III decided to reform the UEE basically justice system. And when she did this, one of the things she decided to do was build a massive prison in the country of Delin here on Charon III. Now, this was just a start. It was a way to kind of get some economic spending in there and get that region going, which it worked. It then got increased drastically when her brother, Corson Messer V, came to power shortly thereafter. Livia Messer had good intentions, but was maybe a little aggressive in her reformation of the judicial system. She ended up in a spacecraft that crashed upon re-entry entering Earth. Her husband was killed, her son was killed, and she was horribly, horribly injured. So she renounced the title of imperator. She gave the title honorarily to her son, who had died in the crash, and then disappeared from public life, and Corson stepped forward, some suggesting that he might have been the root cause of the crash in the first place. Now, Corson doubled down on the prison systems in Charon and basically turned them into the prison camps for the Messers for the rest of their reign. Now, this was something that happened in Charon, and people started to find out about and hear about. The people in Delin were benefiting from all this government money coming in, but some of the other countries were hearing about these horrible, horrible things happening there. Yet whenever somebody tried to question it or look into exactly what was happening, they disappeared, most likely ending up in a lot of these prisons that were built there in the first place. Now, this went pretty deep because in 2670, the Senate, the UEE, recognized Charon III as an official planet in the Senate. And when you get this, you get a senator. It just greases the wheels for more political capital and government spending to come back to your system, which is why planets want to achieve that status of being recognized in the UEE Senate. Now, many believe that Corson Messer basically did a handshake deal with one of the leaders of Delin to get Senate recognition in exchange for all these prisons and all these terrible things he was putting there. And this was kind of proven out as over the next 100 years, these prisons and their reputation only grew. And when the Messers fell in 2792, the first thing people did was go into these prisons and document all the atrocities that had gone on there. Now, this entire time while the Messers were in charge, Charon III was a member of the UEE Senate, had voting rights, kept the money coming on in. But at the time of the Messer fall, Senator Constant Whitterfield from Charon was arrested for fraud and basically locked away. Charon III was assigned to send a new senator to basically represent itself, but vicious political infighting on the planet ended up delaying that for the 3 years until the end of her term was done. When it was done, the population of Charon III, having felt betrayed by what the Messers had done on their planet and what kind of bad light they put it in, decided they didn't need the Senate. If this is how the government was going to treat them, then they don't want to be recognized anymore. So they, in 2795, became the first and only planet in UEE history to renounce their recognition from the UEE Senate. Now, of course, especially after the Messers, the big fiasco, and with the Xi'an kind of like growing stronger on their border, the UEE didn't want to look weak. So what they ended up doing is setting an example of this system. All the government funding to Charon III dried up. All of a sudden, all those, even though they were horrible prisons, people were being put to work there, they were building stuff, food was being supplied, that's all gone. And all of a sudden, the state of Delin is in a critical state because its #1 economic driver has evaporated. Now, the final location that really factors into this is where Delin is on Charon III and where its rival state Acheron is in Charon III. Delin is a massive desert country. Acheron, which is a neighbor and kind of like political rival for power, is half desert and half tropical. So after the UE money left the system, Delin fell into a very hard state. It ended up suffering from a handful of basically famines. They had a tough time getting food in there, and they appealed to the people of Acheron to come along and to basically support them and help them. Acheron, also being part desert, was, well, they also were suffering, but they were slightly better off. So from Dellen, they looked better, but they still weren't any great state. Refugees were flooding over the Dellen border, and in Acheron, things just got crazy, and a civil war broke out between these two states on Charon III. This happened in like 2811. It was when the first drought really struck and civil war broke out. The civil war broke out from 2813 to 2819 before a ceasefire was negotiated, which, to be honest, is kind of been on and off ever since. There's been times in its history where they'll have a few decades where they'll be peaceful and good together, and then something will pop off between the two, and they'll start to attack each other, or old grievances will be raised, and they're back to civil war. One example of this is in 2934, there was a relative time of prosperity on the planet and peace between Dellen and Acheron, when a massive earthquake really devastated parts of Acheron. Dellen at this point was able to step forward and actually provide some aid to the planet, to Acheron, and they ended up building this masterful Philae Tower, which is considered a kind of like a perfect example of super modernist architecture. It's an architectural landmark in the entire UEE. But Dellen, seeing this, wondered how could they build such a massive and beautiful thing when they needed our help after this massive earthquake. So again, tempers flared up and they started to fight again. Most recently, the most recent civil war, which is still ongoing, started in 2944. When Tarquin Class became the leader of Dellen, and Acheron accused him of being a tyrant, of intimidating voters, of rigging the vote, and basically intervened, came on in. The two sides have started to fight again, and they're still fighting to this day. So people can deliver humanitarian supplies and different things to Charon III right now. They desperately need it, but there's also a good chance if you do enter this atmosphere, you may be shot at by either one of these forces. So it's one of these places you want to be very strategic about when you go and visit. The UEE Navy does have a presence in the system, basically just as a watcher. Like the UEE rules and regulations say that we can't intervene unless there's gross misconduct, and fighting between two countries, at least at this point, hasn't been considered that. Many in the UEE are wondered what's the line for when we need to intervene and keep these two countries from consistently tearing each other apart. Now Charon III is really, this is the heart of the Charon story and why it is what it is. But let's step back out and talk about the other few planets in the system really quick. Charon I is a dwarf planet that just by sheer terrible luck got struck by a rogue planet or a massive asteroid, and it knocked it out of its original orbit. So this is actually in a decaying orbit, which is slowly being pulled into the star of Charon. At the same time, the waves from the energy from the sun is blasting off the surface and everything that's here. So as you fly by Charon I, it almost is going to look like a comet because the heat and the intensity of the sun is actually subliming a lot of the gases and the rocks and everything that's there on the planet right now. It's self-destructing, which is very descriptive for what's happening in the system in general. Now, if we move on here to Charon II, this is a gas planet, a smog planet. It's very much like Venus in the fact that it has a runaway greenhouse gas effect, where particulates in the air are trapping the heat, sun's coming in, just not being able to leave, the temperature is obscenely hot and not suited for humanity whatsoever. Charon III, we've discussed. We've got the Gidinashu asteroid belt right here, which was named in honor of a popular 25th century vid character. If we move on past the green line out here, we get to Charon IV, which is an ice giant. Now this is a beautiful blue world, and this actually inspired the name of the system, Charon. Max Keaton, the merchant marine who had discovered the system, had a grandfather who was a classics professor at Redder, and he had told him all about ancient Earth history and ancient Earth lore. And one of the characters that always stuck with him was this character from Greek mythology by the name of Charon. And Charon was basically the ferryman of the dead. When you died, you got into his boat, and he took you across the river Styx to the dead world on the other side. So the blue here is what inspired him of the river and made Max Keaton think of Charon and wanted to answer that. And Charon V is the dead world he was referencing to. So as sailors would go by Charon IV, they would see Charon V out here, which is a dwarf planet. It's a completely dead world. Every few decades, some mining concern figures it might be worth another scan to see if there's anything hidden there that hasn't been noticed before. Nothing's ever been found, and so this dead world just sits on the outer reaches of Charon, waiting to see what happens around it. So that's the story of Charon. A very interesting system because for a geopolitical sense in the game, it'll be a very dangerous system to go, especially around Charon III with the Civil War still raging on. So hope you learned a few things about this interesting star system. And yeah, make sure to check out the star map. It's a fantastic feature. Has a lot of really cool things on there that can teach you a lot of these little tidbits that we're setting out here. Thanks for watching, and yeah, join us again for another episode of Loremakers coming up soon. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.